Hello, welcome to Pluralsight's IT Ops News and Talk. I'm Don Jones, Curriculum Director for IT Ops Content, and this is our show for March 2016. We're taking a different approach to the show this month, which was recorded live from the Tech Mentor Conference in Las Vegas earlier this month. Tech Mentor has one of the largest collections of independent speakers and experts in the IT Ops space, many of whom are also Pluralsight authors. I sent author Jason Helmick off to corner several of them and ask them what they think you should be focusing your technology learning on over the next few months. Let's see what they had to say.
I'm sitting here today with a Tech Mentor speaker, Greg Shields. And, Greg, it's great to see you. Why don't you tell everybody who you are before I get to the magical question?
The magical question, I am Greg Shields, actually. I'm one of the co-chairs here for Tech Mentor, and along with Don Jones. Also, I've been speaking here. I think this is like my 28th or 29th Tech Mentor in a row here now. So definitely done a number of these. I'm also an author evangelist over with Pluralsight. And so have thrown several courses now up in the Pluralsight catalog.
Oh, that's awesome. And here's the thing is a lot of folks that are in IT ops, they're looking at 2016 and they need some guidance. What technologies or what things should they be focusing on this year?
You know what's funny is rather than speaking, at least at first, about specific technologies, there's a phrase that has been bandied about in certain circles for a very long time that other circles have perhaps not necessarily considered to be all that exciting or all that sexy. But that phrase is deployment. And deployment is sort of strangely becoming this thing that is the current new and hip and cool thing. Now, what's weird is I've always sort of resonated with the desktop guys. If you break the world into the server guys and the desktop guys. And this notion of OS deployment is something that we've been dealing with in the desktop world for forever because you got to get those desktop operating systems out. And we're finally at the point now where even the server guys and girls out there are kind of really understanding some of the really cool automations that we've been dealing with for decades now in the desktop world for getting servers deployed. And I'm not talking only about OS deployment here, but all the ways in which you take nothing and turn it into something that runs a workload. And so as far as 2016, there are a lot of different technologies out there. There's awesome stuff in PowerShell. There's awesome stuff in System Center. There's awesome stuff just across the board in the cloud and also on-premise for deploying and automating the deployment of all the things that make up your data center. For 2016, if you're the type of person that's focusing on those automations, I think you're definitely well set for what's coming up.
Having you say to focus on the automations of rapid deployments, that is one of the main focuses that have been going on here at Tech Mentor. So appreciate the time and appreciate your thoughts. Thanks a lot, Greg. I'm sitting here with John O'Neill, one of the presenters here at Tech Mentor. And John, first of all, before I get to the magic question, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Who are you?
Well, Jason, you and I have known each other for many years. I am, as you said, John O'Neill Sr. I am not only a Tech Mentor author, I've been coming here for nigh on a decade now, I guess, and been speaking and meeting with the great attendees. And in addition to that, I'm a Microsoft MVP. I develop content. I'm an author for Pluralsight. I really enjoy taking some of my sessions and turning them into reusable courses. I write for Redmond Magazine and others, and then I do still function in the trenches as an IT pro and as an IT executive for a number of different consultancy customers.
Well, and that's really a great kind of aspect, being still in the trenches kind of thing. So a lot of IT folks, they need to know what to focus on this year, 2016. There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of noise around a lot of things. So being somebody who's in the trenches, what's your opinion on what IT folks should be focusing on this year?
Well, let me start by saying I think that they should focus on kind of a premise that I like to present, which is find and deliver solutions. Don't get so lost in the technology that you forget that what you're working on doesn't really provide a solution to your company, to your organization.
That's actually really profound. It is profound in the sense that it should be our mantra, right? We're trying to solve business problems, but we do get lost in some of those, the technologies and stuff.
Yeah, we're all techies. We're all we're all geeks at heart, and we love the technology, and we love solving the puzzles and the problems. But very few of us actually work for technology companies, right? We're working for manufacturers, we're working in education, we're wherever we are. So if what we're doing with that technology isn't solving a problem or providing a value to that organization, we kind of have failed.
Right.
And I think that those organizations are really looking for IT pros who step in and is that problem solver type of person.
Now, do you have a particular technology that is solving problems that you are focusing on?
One thing that I'm really devoting a lot of energy to lately is deployment, and particularly when I talk about that, I'm talking about deployment of applications, because taking that same tenant we were talking about and looking at a solution for a company, maybe they have a line of business app that's old and antiquated, but they're still spending a lot of money to support it because they can't get rid of it. So they have infrastructure involved, the server that they're running it on, the switch that server's plugged into. So I'm spending a lot working with like technologies akin to Azure Remote App. I just
Okay.
did a session on that, where you can take that line of business app, put it up in the cloud, make it available to those users, solve that problem, but now don't worry about Windows updates or the server architecture behind it or the switch architecture. You can just kind of swipe that off your list, still have that app available to your users, right? And now it's across devices, it's device agnostic, and I'm a real fan.
And I like how you describe this. You solved a problem with an application deployment, but you very curiously stayed away from using the term cloud. But that is part of a lot of the solutions today, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And
Whether they be public or private clouds, that's part of the solution.
absolutely. And I'm very excited about what Microsoft is doing to bring the Azure Stack into on-prem, right, into private cloud, because you're right, I kind of danced around that. People get caught too much up in the term cloud, and they start creating these visions of what that means. And really, to me, all cloud means is I've solved a problem, or I need to solve a problem, and I need to not really focus on the underlying tech that enables it, right?
Right.
I need something to host this application. I need hardware devoted to this application. I need it to be able to elastically grow and shrink based on demands. Well, by using cloud type architectures, I can take that away from the demands of my IT department and let somebody else worry about it, whether it be Microsoft or Amazon or whoever, I don't care.
Well, that's actually very valuable information. Hey, John, thanks a lot for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Jason. Have a great one.
I'm here right now with Kunal. I'm one of the speakers here at TechMentor. And, I have a magical question for you. But before we get to that, why don't you tell us who you are?
I'm Kunal. So I was a speaker here for the Azure AD session. I'm a Pluralsight author. I've come all the way from India. I'm an IT consultant and a speaker. I enjoy doing IT.
I'm still amazed at the long flight you went through to get here, so we really appreciate it. But here's my magical question. So for IT folks that are trying to figure out, with all of these technologies and all of this, what should they be focusing on for 2016?
For 2016, what I think they should be focusing on is the way they approach IT. Because till today, they have been stuck in their own traditional ways, where they're mostly focused around the on-premises. And with the advent of the cloud, obviously they are deploying applications upon the cloud, but then the other parts of the infrastructure, they're not re-architecting it from a cloud perspective. For example, last year I was at a session of Auden Thomas, where he said that we have to move your perimeter network to the cloud. And that was a fantastic idea. And this time I've taught them how you could architect a hybrid identity solution, because the first step of access is identity.
Right.
And in the previous days, all the identities were on your desktop stuck behind the corporate firewall. But today you have applications, devices, users running all across the country, all across the world. And that is why you have to re-architect the identity solution in a way which can make the access after that easy and make it secure.
And one of the things that you focused on here was Azure AD with
Exactly.
that exact kind of concept, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and helping us focus on areas to pay attention to. So thank you very much.
Absolutely, no problem, Jason. Thank you so much.
You have a great day.
Yeah.
Hey, I just caught up with Ed Horley, another one of the speakers here at TechMentor. Ed, why don't you I have a magical question for you, but why don't you tell everybody who you are before I ask the question?
Sure. So Ed Horley, work for GroupArt Technology and spend a lot of time. Most people call me the crazy IPv6 dude.
So I think we kind of get an idea of how this answer is going to go. So the real question is going to be, For IT folks, there's a lot of stuff going on right now. So for this year, 2016, what should IT folks focus on? And it's okay if you say IPv6.
It's okay if I say
Yeah.
that? Well, everyone should be focused on PowerShell, number one, right? You're a great love.
Well, thank you.
I think V6 fits in great with that because all the command sets work for V6 too.
Oh, there we go.
Amazing. So you don't have to worry about that. Yeah, I think obviously cloud automation. I think V6 is going to become a bigger deal. I think anyone who's paying attention to those particular topics, especially around maybe containers, is something net new that they could look at. Nano server, I think, is pretty exciting, and following what's going to happen with those announcements. I think if you're tracking all of those things and really paying attention, I think you'll be pretty spot on with what's going to.
But I mean, you do bring a unique characteristic here at TechMinter in that not a lot of people are talking about communications and infrastructure, and it's actually an important deal, though, right? I mean, this whole thing about IPv6 is a big deal.
Yeah, I think it. I think it surprises a lot of people when I tell them, close to 80% of Verizon Mobile, traffic is native IPv6.
Yeah, that is surprising,
It's
right? Yeah.
They get a little surprised. I think V6 is one of those things when it's working, no one will notice, right? Because it's doing what it's supposed to do, which was that transition from V4 to V6. The problem that most people don't realize is that V6 is already running. It's preferred. It's on by default in every major operating system, including mobile handsets. And so if you don't pay attention to it, you just don't know anything about it, you're not really doing a good job understanding what's running in your environment.
And that's the key, is trying to understand what's going on in the environment.
That's exactly right. It's the same thing's true with all of the net new stuff that we're using and hey, we have to deal with no GUI anymore. That's going to be the new reality. Well, this new reality on V6 is happening too. Just not as many people are necessarily paying attention to it, but hopefully folks can check out my courses and maybe learn a little more.
Well, I'm so glad you're here because I think everybody needs to pay a little bit more attention to it. So I got to say, thank you very much for taking the time and talking with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much.
Now, here's the best part, because we have somebody from outside of the country that's come in to speak here at TechMinter from Finland, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Sammy from Finland. Sammy, why don't you tell us who you are, and then I'm going to ask you a magical question.
All right, so my name is Sami Laiho, and as Jason mentioned, I'm from Finland. I'm teaching operating system internals, troubleshooting, and security.
Oh, awesome. Now, with all of that, so this is going to be very interesting. My question is this. IT folks are confused. It's very challenging right now with all of the technologies and all of that are around. What should IT folks be focusing on for 2016?
I'd definitely say there's three things you have to learn, and there's one thing you have to accept. So you have to learn PKI. Certificates are all over the place, and people have no idea how they actually work.
I think, wow, you just hit the nail on the head there with that one. I totally agree with that. That's one of the big challenges, right?
Then it's IPv6. Got to do it. Although it's going to take a while, we'll anyway have to get there sometime. And PowerShell. So I'd say those are the three things you have to learn: PKI, IPv6, and PowerShell. And dude, you got to accept the cloud.
You've got to accept the cloud. Accept it both public or if it's in-house, like with Azure Stack from the Microsoft side, that kind of thing. It's time to start operating cloud, whether public or private kind of thing. I think I'm hearing that from a lot of folks. I'm so glad you brought up PKI because, like you, I see that as the missing link for a lot of IT guys. So that's awesome. Well, thanks for taking some time and talking to us, and I hope you have a great week here at TechMinter.
You bet. Thank you.
I just got really lucky. I caught up with Mark Manassi, the incredible, the amazing Mark Manassi here at TechMinter. Mark, how you doing?
I'm really good. And Jason, it's always a pleasure to talk with you, my friend.
I really appreciate it. Why don't you tell everybody, if they don't know, and I can't imagine anyone who doesn't know, why don't you tell everybody who you are?
I've written 43 books. I've been doing this since, the early 80s and that sort of thing. I'm the guy that's been kind of a journalist and consultant, and I'm the one that tells you what really works. And, which is why everybody else in the business that's been there that long is working for Microsoft. I've never been invited to go work for Microsoft.
Well, because you are so tuned into this industry, this is a great question for you. There's a lot of confusion going on right now with a lot of the IT ops folks because there's so many new technologies. They're trying to catch up to technologies. There's so many business reactionary things they need to do. What do you think somebody in IT should be focused on this year in 2016?
Let me reformulate what you said.
Okay.
You're basically right. I think IT people First of all, as I said at the keynote, I don't know if you were there for the keynote, but one of the things I said is that, people worried, IT people worried about actually losing their jobs over the cloud. And I say that's ridiculous. I mean, because if you expect, you know how this, sometimes you'll hear somebody says I've had 20 years experience in something when they've actually experienced the same year 20 times.
Yeah,
Now,
exactly. That's great. Yeah,
there's
that's
no
the
IT
thing.
people that do that though.
Right.
I mean, if you're still changing passwords, yeah, there's a web page that's already put you out of business.
Right.
So if you're liking what you're doing and you want to keep doing it for 10 years, you're in the wrong industry.
Yeah.
But the problem we all have is that, a new buzzword comes out, and so many of them are hooey. So many of them it's a MacGuffin. It's some, it's marketecture rather than actual. So let's talk about a few things. First of all, like you, I'm trying to infect everyone with PowerShell. And, as time's gone on, and now that we're looking at Windows 10 in detail, I've got a 2-day course on it now, the 2016 server, doing more and more work on it. Jason, there are things on server side where only 50% of the functionality of the new technology is in the GUI.
Well,
if you want to do almost anything that's sexy in 2016, you have to do PowerShell.
And I think that's really important that you bring that up, because that's what basically the Exchange team did, right? With Exchange 2007 and on, you just didn't have all the functionality because you needed to automate it, was what they were pushing you for.
Right, absolutely. So the first thing is always going to be PowerShell. It isn't as hard as everybody thinks it is. I wish that there were a way to do it without a command line. People just clench. You got 40 people in a class. You say open the command prompt, and you can hear 40 puckers.
Yeah.
all around the room. So it's going to be okay. It's almost I want to hand out Xanax.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because once you get past, because the great thing about PowerShell is that most command line things leave you hanging, because if you learn one, it doesn't help you with the other. Whereas with GUIs, in contrast, if you learn Solitaire, you know so much about Windows, you could become an Active Directory administrator.
There you
Pretty
go.
much. You're
Yeah.
50% of the way there. I mean, what I mean is the little X up in the corner works the way, and the thing lying down, and you expect there to be a menu over here. I mean, that's great. There's that repeatability. Don't waste my time. PowerShell does that. PowerShell's the first, maybe the second, if we include VMS. First or second command line interface that doesn't waste your time. You spent, like in my class, 2-day class, we spend 4 hours on the first command line. It's a get-AD user, because it's an opportunity to show you how the whole thing works. But after that, we're doing new commandlets, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So it's great. So PowerShell, this is the best investment I think you can do. Second thing, the notion of the highly available stuff. Clusters used to be exotic.
Right.
I mean, seriously, big companies always had VMware clusters, and more recently Hyper-V clusters, SQL clusters. But man, you needed expensive SANs, and you were investing a lot of money, and you're sending somebody off to SAN school,
Right.
and that person had better never leave, because they've all got weird, bizarre command line or web interfaces. Microsoft changed that radically in 2012, as you know, when Storage Spaces came out. It was a good whack at creating a shared storage. Now, why is the man talking about shared storage? The whole idea with high availability, if it's Hyper-V or if it's SQL, is I've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Hyper-V boxes, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 SQL boxes. So if one of them dies, I'm okay. But they've all got to be drawing from the same place for that data. That shared storage is where that's where the SQL databases live. Right. That's where the Hyper-V VHDs live. And of course, you've got to have some fault tolerance in that as well. The thing is, though, small and medium-sized businesses just couldn't afford it. Microsoft, by bringing out storage spaces, let's be very clear, back in 2012, I characterized it as you get a bunch of machines, you put a bunch of hard drives on them, and you can get about 75% of the functionality of a SAN at about 20% of the price. Lots of pieces missing, but then 2012 R2 came out. And 2012 R2 was wonderful. It's that 1.1 thing that Microsoft does. They say, oh my God, this is the most amazing new. You're like, I'm waiting a version.
Yeah.
Paradigm shift. Okay. That's what they say about paradigms, right? Shift happens.
Shift happens.
So, and 2016 looks to be a little bit of 2012 R2, but there's some other things that are big. I shouldn't be banging on the table while you've got recorders. Sorry about that banging. In any case, it's once again taking all the good stuff and taking it forward. It's a fascinating thing to see. Whether you are a VMware fan or a Hyper-V fan, I don't care. My point, though, is that because the shared storage has become so much cheaper, that's the linchpin. That was the hard part about having a cluster. Right. Well, now, the other thing, too, is there's been a side effect. Because Microsoft's got cheaper SANs, all the SAN prices are coming down. So maybe in the end analysis, no one will use storage spaces.
Right.
But it'll be the thing that makes us able to afford a left hand.
It brought the prices down.
Exactly. But this is becoming, it's not an exotic, it's really not an exotic skill anymore. You know, it's the easiest thing in the world. Get a couple of old laptops. As a matter of fact, with Hyper-V, you can use a file share, just a regular old file. Now, please don't do that in production, but you can set up a cluster and hack around with it, pull plugs on systems, see how it all works. Please do that. Please do that. On Pluralsight, I did a little 3-hour video or something like that to just introduce you, bring it from 0 to 60 in clusters. I'm sure there's lots of other content on the Pluralsight site as well. And, well, that's my third one. Oh, third one is get a little handle on the cloud. And by the cloud, I mean the so-called IaaS, the virtual machines in the sky.
Right.
For years, I've been running a web server since 1995. It's been different machines and different software, but I've had my site for that long. Well, back in the mid-90s, I had like 50 employees. Then the internet came around. I got rid of them. Now I'm down to like me. But that meant, though, that my web server was a machine sitting over in my garage with my business internet account and that sort of thing, which was quite expensive and getting more expensive. And it was a big pain in the neck. Well, I sold that house. I sold my farm, and I moved to a smaller house. I'm like, do I want to spend $400 a month on fairly slow business internet again? Nah. Comcast gives me 90 megabits, down and 15 up for $90 until next year when they triple the price.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely great. But I don't want to have to look after my server anymore. Now, the last time I rebuilt my web server, I built it as a Hyper-V virtual machine because we knew that if you've got a virtual machine on a Hyper-V box, you can upload those drives to Azure because I thought that would be interesting. Now, let's be very clear. It's not that I'm a Microsoft fan over an Amazon fan. They're both great infrastructure. It's just I live in the Microsoft space, and it's just a little better.
It's the concept more than
Exactly.
the product.
Yeah, well, because you and I are the kind of guys that people hire to say, help us put this together. How do these pieces fit together? Playing with all the Microsoft stuff just makes it easier to do. And honestly, I think that Microsoft is going to be the premier cloud vendor in a couple of years. And not because they're better, but because they're hitting all the bases. You name a kind of cloud service, IaaS, SaaS, IDaaS, PaaS, etc. They've got all those things. And even the unlikely one, like when you see Azure Cloud Services, it's an awesome thing. For those who don't know, the idea is it's an operating system in the cloud. So none of your existing apps work. You're building a new one from scratch.
Right.
Like, what? Here's on fire. We have to build new apps? Well, here's the cool thing, though. Even the crappiest Azure Cloud Service has built-in reliability, and it's the ability to get big or get small with a couple of clicks. And so it's something. That's the good news. The bad news is if you spend a lot of money on that, you're locked into Microsoft.
Right.
So I wouldn't have thought that would grow, but it's grown insanely.
It has grown insanely, and I would also kind of inject with that with the cloud, especially with Azure. Now Azure Stack, so you can do it in-house as well. But like you said, I think that's very important to. You got to start to focus on the cloud, and you got to understand what it's there for. Even if you're going to use it for some of your own personal stuff, get started with doing that. I love your list of the three: the PowerShell, the highly available stuff, and the cloud. That's a great list. You know what? Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today, and thanks for a great week and a great show.
Hey, and you guys had a lot to do with it too.
Thank you.
Always good talking to you, pal.
Good talking to you. Hey everyone, I just ran into Janelle Crothers, who works at Microsoft, who is speaking here at TechMinter. So I'm going to ask her the magic question. First of all, Janelle, thank you. And why don't you tell everybody who you are, what you do?
Okay, well, I'm Janelle Crothers. I'm a technical evangelist for Microsoft. So I get the great opportunity of being able to talk to IT professionals through all sorts of, first-party events, social media, blog, and stuff like that about Microsoft IT stuff.
And that's
how
the fun
great
part,
can
right?
That's the fun part.
That's
yeah.
great. Well, then you're a perfect person for this question because working with a lot of IT people, there's a lot of confusion because of a lot of technology and all that kind of things. If you were going to recommend IT folks to focus in a particular area or a particular technology for this year, 2016, what would you recommend them to do?
I don't really think there's a particular one technology. I mean, it's unfair to say everything.
Right.
Do it all. Because I think we've heard that sort of story before. But I think it really comes down to, looking at really anything related to security as a focus. We're looking at a lot of changes in identity management, the uses of data. There's been some great articles and stuff out there talking about how data right now is really looked at as a commodity. For organizations, but if you kind of flip it around a little bit, it's also a big liability. And IT professionals, once you strip away the servers and all the fun stuff, we're responsible, we're the stewards of our company's data. And looking at how one manages that and the security practices behind that, and all that plays into, virtualization, cloud, no cloud, data center, all of it, there's a security component.
You know what? I find that very interesting because I totally agree with you, but I often myself, I don't really necessarily think about it. Everybody in IT needs to be responsible for security. I mean, it's impacting everybody's company every single day.
Every single user.
Whatever technology you're focused on, be responsible for the security side of it as well.
Right. It's like you be responsible for how you're utilizing that technology.
Well,
good, not evil. We know people who say that.
Right.
But yeah, it's like it really comes down to: am I doing what's right by my company? Am I doing what's right for my customer? And can you sleep at night about do you feel comfortable putting your credentials in the software that you're looking at? Are you comfortable with knowing that you could explain to your mother or your aunt or your uncle, that this is a good technology, that this company's backed by this technology, that their credentials are safe, and their identity is safe and their data is safe?
Well, I think that's perfect. You raised a great focus, I think, for the year for everybody to do. Janelle, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
Oh, it's been great to be here.
Oh, awesome.
And now, as a final offering to you this month, in lieu of a rant or a deep dive, I'm sharing the audio from the keynote address I delivered at TechMentor. It's on DevOps, that sometimes murky term that actually has a lot of meaning and value once you dig in. I hope you enjoy.
I want to talk today a little bit about this DevOps thing, blah, 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 blah. Because much like the big marketing word before it, cloud, DevOps has been a little bit co-opted by some companies that want to profit from it. And I get that. Companies that profit are great because they stay around. But at the same time, when companies start doing that, does it not make you feel like you just want to ignore it? Right? Like with cloud. How many of you ignored cloud because everybody was trying to jam it down your throat and take money from you? Right? It's just like this natural resistance. Stop. I don't want that. It doesn't feel good. No means no. So I wanted to talk about this because DevOps actually is real. It is a thing. It's not something you can buy, though. You can't spend money for it, right? You can't. It doesn't come with a maintenance contract, but it is a real concrete thing. It's not an abstract philosophy that we can just talk about. This is something you can do. This is something that is real. It is something that is being done. The problem is everybody only wants to talk about the software development side of it. Right? Oh, it's agile coding and it's code and it's code. President of the United freaking States stood up and said, everyone should learn to code. I'm like, okay, what network is that going to talk to? Right? So there's this ops side of DevOps, which is why it's called DevOps and not just dev. And it's important and it's a real thing. So kind of as a high level, I want to talk about what this really looks like in concrete terms, where I have seen it being used for reals, and what they achieve from that and what it gets them. My next session after lunch, I will dive into more technical implementations in a Microsoft-specific environment. So this is going to be a little bit high level in how people are doing it and what the pieces are. And then my after lunch session, we'll talk actual product names, technologies, tools, things like that. You can make a shopping list if you want to. So DevOps, it's a real thing. It is not marketing. The whole idea behind DevOps, you want the truth or the fancy version? Truth, done. Your developers are better than you. They've been telling you that for years. So here's what's happened. Companies get into this mode where they want to push out software faster and faster and faster, right? We want to be able to make a push it out, make a fix, push it out, new feature, push it out, push. And ops has always had to, this is not our decision, we've always had to say, we can't do it that fast because the world will explode, things will break. And you, the company, have made it very clear that that's not okay. Because every time frickin' email goes down, everyone's on the phone. So we're not going to do anything that might break anything. Slow the heck down. In fact, let's adopt a change management framework invented by the DMV so we just don't ever have to change anything ever. All right, that's what ITIL is. How many of you use ITIL? The British government way of running business. So the whole point of DevOps was to take this agile software development and find a way to as safely as practical, push those things out faster. That essentially means two things. A lot of automation. We still want to test. No one has said this doesn't involve testing or QA or validation or anything else. If you work at a hospital and there's so many new stuff being pushed out, I would like it if you tested that because I might need that hospital. Right? So we're not talking about reckless chaos, but we're talking about shortening the cycles, shortening the time it takes for us to become comfortable with something so that we can push it out quickly, shortening the actual deployment process because Lord knows that can be painful sometimes. And there's also a little bit of just brute honesty. How many of you have never made a mistake? We all do. And so this current more waterfall approach to ops, which is we're going to spend as much time and money as necessary to bring our failure rate down to 0, is a little crazy. Because going from 90% success to 92% success is this like exponential jump in the amount of time, in the amount of cost, in the amount of effort. Going to 95% is even more. If we wanted 90% reliability, we're going to take a week to figure this out and then we're going to push it. If we want 92, it takes a month. If we want 95, it takes 6 months. It just gets worse and worse and worse. And it's actually a diminishing point of return because you will never hit 100%. For all that time and all that effort and all that money, you will still break stuff and look like a dummy. The problem with our current approach is that when we break things, we can't fix them really quickly either. So we get hesitant about pushing something out because we know if it's screwed up, it's going to take us a long time to push a fix out, and we're going to really obviously look like dummies. So the whole point of DevOps is just to move faster. Not only to get the releases out from the software developers faster, but to get the fixes out faster. And to know that if we fail, we can fail with style and push a fix out really quick. It's about being quick, not agile. I hate that word. It's about being quick. Unfortunately, DevOps, not every organization is going to be able to pull this off. Some people just are not up to it. Some managers aren't up to it. You go to management and say, hey, what happens if we push out a change and the email server goes down for an hour? Oh, it's the end of the world. Actually, it isn't because we've had the email server down for an hour or so and we're all still here. But a lot of management just doesn't want to do that. How many of you would say, I want you to speak in the voice of your leader, your CEO or your CIO or whatever. How many of you, show of hands, would that person say email is mission critical? That is BS. Email is not mission critical. Email goes down, no one dies. Probably very few people, if any, even lose sleep. And we're talking short outages. But that's why not everyone will be able to do this. You have to pick your battles. You have to decide where you're going to invest in high reliability and where it's okay to absorb a little bit. Anybody live in a big, very urbanized city like New York City or something like that? So you know how to parallel park? Yeah, I do not. And yet had to the other day and had to drive along the street because it's downtown Vegas and there's on-street parking. I had to drive along until I found what? Several spaces that were empty so I could pull in. And the little suckers parked on either side of me, right? So now I'm screwed up. So I back up and what did I do? Of course I hit him. I'm not moving real fast, it's a truck, but boom, and his alarm went off and everything else. But I've got bumpers, and that's why they're called bumpers, not no touchies, right? It's not mission critical that my bumper never go unscathed. And people who live in big cities know this, and their bumpers are all dinged up because that's what they're for. And so you've got this resiliency built into the system. It's designed to take a little bit of fail, and it can still keep going. And was I horribly embarrassed? Yes. Did I try to get away before someone came out and saw their car flashing? Yes. Could they catch me? No, it was still flashing. I was like 3 blocks away and it was still going off. No one cared. So understand Understand where you've actually got bumpers and where you've got a little room for error, and don't try to make those things fail-proof when you've got bumpers. Email being out for an hour is not mission critical. It just isn't. And if it is mission critical, if it's that mission critical, hire Microsoft to do it for you. They'd love to. And then you don't have to worry about that anymore. And that's another thing. Outsource where it makes sense to. If this is the mission critical stuff that only you can do, all of your time should be focused on that. Everything else is a distraction, try and get rid of it. And you can tell the boss that. We need everything running. Great. I'm the only one who can do this because it's unique to our company. We need to get rid of everything else. If you want this perfect, you need to de-distract me and get this out of the way. And that's why this isn't going to be perfect for every company, because not everyone isn't about that. DevOps is not tools. Tools can certainly make your life easier, right? Home building is not a hammer, but hammers are nice to have when you're building a home. DevOps is a way of doing business. It's a way of running IT. It's a way of deploying software and services quickly and reasonably safely, knowing that quickly can sometimes make up for failure. As long as you can recover quickly, failure is not as bad of a thing. But you will need tools to make this happen. The fact is, what did Mark say? Everybody in Mark's keynote, how many IQ points do you lose during a disaster? At least 50. Most of the time, you go down to the minimum number of brain cells required to breathe. And that's why you can't do DevOps. You're going to need tools. You're either going to build them yourself or you're going to buy them from someone. And what you do depends on your budget, how specific it needs to be to the way your business operates, everything else. You're going to have to pay something, either time or money. They're essential because tools make it happen when you get dumb. And you have to assume you're going to get dumb in a disaster and that you will need the tools to save you. And so that's why this is an important part of it. A few DevOps facts. These are real case studies numbers from real companies. I pulled some of this together from an IDC report and another one from a Gartner report. A real set of companies who are really doing DevOps had 60 times fewer failures, not more. And your monkey brain is telling you, well, no, if we're just doing this fast, something's going to fail. But it's not just fast. It's fast and automated, and the computers always do it the right way every time once we get them working right. And that's how they get fewer. They get consistency, and that removes failure. They can recover 168 times faster. And I'll give you a perfect example of that. Was working with a company that used a Linux-based mail system. They weren't on Exchange. They had a fairly simple system. Their mail server died. Okay, now they've got their storage on a SAN. You guys have SANs, right? The storage is on a SAN. That's fine. That's all redundant, battery, blah, 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 blah. But the mail server died. And they had a cluster of mail servers, and they both happened to die. Now, how long of a recovery is that? I mean, you got to spin up a new VM or a server. You got to install the OS. You got to get the software on there. No, they just pushed a button. Those two servers flitted off into heaven, and two new ones came back online. 60 seconds. Because they had automated all of this, and they were prepared to do things fast. 30 times more deployments. That means they're deploying something on average once every couple of weeks, right? 30 times more deployments. 200 times shorter lead time for deploying stuff. We used to take 6 months. Now we take 24 hours. When the devs say it tested, we're ready to go, they push a button and the next day it's there. Sounds great, right? It's not a fantasy. It's totally achievable. You can totally do this. People are doing it. Let's run through an example. Let's say I have developers. How many of you have developers? Perfect. One of the biggest problems we have in moving from code to environment, and back me up if you think I'm right here, and tell me if you think I'm wrong, is that the developers never bother to tell me what the heck the server's supposed to have on it to make this thing actually run in production, right? This is it, right? And so what do? Well, let's have a test environment. Sure, okay, we put this over here. Oh, it didn't work. Oh, you're missing this package. Okay, I'll install that package. Now the test environment's working great. Does that help me get it into production more reliably? No. Not unless I pick up the test server and say, you are now production, begin. Because there's no knowledge transfer and it's all too manual. So what we propose instead in a DevOps type environment is as part of the code, the developer documents in a machine and human readable fashion what the environment needs to look like. This is the first thing they do. They might say, for example, I need the web server package, the PHP package. The environment needs 2 gigs of RAM. It needs a C-class processor. It needs 2 of those babies. And it needs a Windows operating system. And you tell them the only way your test environment or production or anything else, even your little dev unit testing environment, the only way stuff gets in that environment is if you put it in that dock. So you, Mr. Dev, you don't install anything. You dock it. I'll take care of it. And so I've now got that completely documented. And I feed that code to a deployment engine. This is the magical tool that you either buy or create or cobble together. Depends on your environment. We're going to talk about a concrete example here in just a little bit. That deployment engine spins up the environment as instructed in the documentation. It configures it. It downloads and installs whatever packages it has to. It compiles and installs the developer's code right into that environment, and it starts running whatever automated tests. And if the tests pass, well, you just push a different button and it does the same thing again in the production environment. And it's consistent and it's automated. All you have to do is build the tools, build the engine, and then you step back and watch and let it happen. Right? You're not building houses, you're building hammers. How many of you could use a hammer when you deal with your developers? See? This is perfect. So let's say we get to our test phase. Sets up the environment, compiles and injects the application code into the environment, starts running the automated tests. Let's say the tests go well. So some tools, set up the environment. Desired state configuration, Puppet, Chef, Ansible, Salt, System Center Virtual Machine Manager. There's lots of tools we can use to set up environments, inject stuff into them, and I'll talk about Microsoft specifics, Microsoft World specifics, not just their products, in my afternoon session. Reads through that document about what the application needs and makes sure all those things are there. And if the developer forgot something, then the tests will fail and it gets kicked back and they go, oh, yeah, that's because you didn't have the blah, blah, blah package. Great, add that to your documentation, we'll run the test again. You can go from failure to fix in minutes that way because you don't have to do anything. Neither does the dev. They don't have to become an expert in installing packages or command line package management or anything else. They just have to push a button. I'd like to test this. Oh crap, it broke. Test it again. And it's automated. They don't even have to call you and say, I'm ready to run another test. Modern IDEs like Visual Studio have the button already in them. They just push it. And you have it wired up so it spins up a brand new VM, puts their stuff on, runs their tests, and spits out the results. So we're building the back end for this. Compiling and injecting the code, your standard compilers get called, or they take checked in compiled code or however you decide to build it. You jam that right into the new VM. Tools like TeamCity do this. This exists. PowerShell.org actually runs a TeamCity instance because if you build a publicly available open source PowerShell module, we will run automated tests against it and publish it to the PowerShell gallery for you. So this already exists. This is this continuous integration pipeline. Again, tools like TeamCity can help you run those automated tests. If it failed, bounce it back to the dev. Decommission the environment. Delete the environment completely. It is gone. I don't want it anymore. When we do it the next time, I'm starting from scratch again. That's why we want this to be automated, because I don't want to have to sit here and manually install Windows Server 27 times a day. It's not scalable. If it passed, I already have everything I need to move safely into production. Now, when you're writing automated tests, are you sometimes going to miss something? Yes. And that's a fail. And then you fix it, and you add that to your automated suite package for next time, and you move on with your life. Because we're going to fail. We always have failed at some point. This way, we're documenting our failures in an automated fashion so that same failure can't happen again. It's like learning, kinda. No, it actually is learning, isn't it? That's what that means. Amazon Elastic Beanstalk does this today, right now. As a dev, it's glorious. If you have not looked into what this thing does, I don't care if your company's going to use it or not, and I'll make another point about that in just a second. You need to look at this. The dev sits here with their code, and they've got their own environment. Maybe they've got a local web server, and they're putting all their web code together and blah, 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 and they're happy and dumb. And they've got a little folder that has all their configuration documents, and it's got a little text file, and they type the names of the package they want, and the environment variables they need, everything else, da 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 da. And when they're ready, they can either go to the Amazon web console, the little admin console, or they can just, in their IDE, they can just ping Amazon's REST API and say, hey, we're ready. Amazon will go to the Git repo where the code lives, get it out of the Git repo, so developers can't deploy anything that's not checked in. That's good. Gets it out of the Git repo, spins up the virtual machines, adds the packages, configures the environment, injects the application code, registers the VMs with the load balancer, deregisters the VMs that were running the old version of the application, and kills those VMs. Amazon is playing the role of ops here. Do you think there's some dude or gal sitting up in Seattle waiting for that developer to say, okay, spin it up, and they go, all right. No. It's all automated. They've built the deployment engine. That's what Elastic Beanstalk is. How many of you have looked at Elastic Beanstalk? How many of you haven't looked at it because you know your company's never going to use it? Yeah? Few? Your career cannot depend on what your company may or may not use. You need to be aware of things like this. You need to look up and find out what they do and how they work, because somewhere, sometime, this is going to save your butt. Even if you're not using this product, you'll know what it does. Even if you have to buy it from someone else or build it yourself, you'll have a good example of something that works. This is why you just want to stay generally informed, which is why you're here today learning about it. What do you think? Neat process. Works. Actually is a real thing. Lots of companies use this. Lots of other companies have something similar that they've built that they use strictly internally on-prem. It's the process that we're talking about here. Taking ops out of the picture. We build tooling, we build engines, we build hammers. Everything else happens magically when the developer says so. Think about that. Yeah, we just pushed out a new version of the app, the entire company's down. Whose fault is it? Clearly not mine, because I had nothing to do with it. I was sitting here drinking coffee. The developer pushed go, and it passed the automated tests that the developer wrote, and so the system pushed it live. It's the developer's fault. I can't mess up because I didn't have my hands anywhere on it. I pushed out the exact same thing he said passed his test. Kill him. Right? Which is really where we've all been trying to get to. This is a big difference from how we do it today, though, isn't it? And this type of big difference doesn't happen unless big management buys off. And that's why DevOps is just as much a cultural shift as it is a technology implementation. We can do this, but the business has got to want it, and the business has to want the whole thing. You can't do DevOps halfway, right? You have to marry this, and you have to live with it, and you have to have children with it, and you have to raise them until they have their own children. This is a commitment to how you run IT. And it's not just app deployment, kids. This is server deployment. Next time you want to spin up a new domain controller, you do it by documenting what a domain controller looks like. You hand that off to some kind of engine, Chef, Puppet, Ansible, DSC, whatever. And the automation system actually builds the domain controller. And when it's done, you look at it. Yep, that's right. Do it again in production. And now every time we need to build a new domain controller, we push a button. It's everything. It's everything we do. Now, obviously, you're not going to tackle all that right up front. Go after some project that makes sense, that seems like you can wrap your head around, and go after that one first. Get good with the tools, start to understand the methodologies, become comfortable with it, right? You can't just change everything overnight, and then start expanding out to the next thing. But the idea is to document what things should look like in a way that the computer can make them look like that. That's why all of us, me, Jason, Jeff Hicks, we're all running around going, DSC, 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 because this is Microsoft's first go at actually making that a reality. Pluralsight, company I work for, we do this. We run everything out of Amazon. And when we need a new media server that serves up our streaming videos, or we need a new machine to service the search functionality, or we need to expand the capacity on the main website page, no one even pushes a button. We've got a system, a load balancer that says, yeah, we're really kind of getting at load for the 5 servers you've got right now. And I know that kind of getting at load means I have to run this little thing over here, and a new server just magically appears. And no one even knows or cares. Because my ops team built all that, and now it runs itself. They don't sit there and push buttons and run things all day. Sound fun? Does it sound like it might put some people out of work? Yeah. Yeah, if we're doing everything automated and we're not actually clicking next, next, finish and doing everything manually, we don't need as many IT people. So are you the one that's going to build this stuff, or the one who's going to get deep sixed by it? Because companies are figuring this out. They figured out it's actually a lot cheaper to hire a small number of really smart IT folks instead of a large number of cheap, not so smart IT folks. So you need to, when you get back to work, you need to sit down in a little cube farm and look around you, because that's the competition. And you need to make sure you're on the top of the smart list when the time comes, yeah? Sorry. Told you there'd be a musical number. So in EBS, Elastic Beanstalk, Amazon plays that role of operations, and they've automated everything because they can't afford to have human beings doing this manually. We can tell the Salesforce number story, can't we?
You're not supposed to say the name of the company.
Oh, okay, never mind. So there's this large, there's actually several companies that are in this kind of condition. Azure certainly is this way. Amazon is this way. Tens of thousands of servers run by fewer than this many people. Some of these large software as a service companies literally have 10,000, 12,000, 15,000, 20,000 servers, and they run them with maybe 7 people so that 2 of them can be on vacation at any given moment. And they do not do it by doing anything manually. Everything gets documented and pushed out to automation engines, and it has to happen. They don't sit around fixing servers. If a server breaks, they just kill it and spin up one that isn't broken. It's a different way of approaching IT. What about containers? Or what about failure? I always get confused between the fail whale and Docker, and I think that's really a branding problem on their part. This is the Twitter fail whale. Right, you guys seen this? It doesn't come up as much now, but back in the day, this was like a daily occurrence. What about failure? How tolerant is your company of failure? And I don't mean what do they say. I mean how well do they actually tolerate things when failure occurs? Well, of course they don't. First world problem, right? My email is down. Shut up. You whiny little... And that's what you can tell them. Shut up, you whiny little. Failure is an option because it's always been an option. It's always going to be an option. We've always failed. We've never not eliminated failure. It's going to happen. You don't have to like it, but what we're doing right now is not eliminating failure. We're eliminating change. Because change is the root of all failure, right? It turns out, if I don't change anything, nothing goes wrong. Well, sure, until what you've got is no longer useful and the entire company goes out of business because it didn't change. That would kind of suck. And there are absolutely companies that has happened to. They have failed to keep up with their competition and they have been bypassed. Companies like Walmart, as a really good example, spend an immense amount of money on IT because their margins are so thin they can't afford to lose market share. And so when it comes to distribution logistics and store logistics and all this other stuff that technology plays into, they have to be really up to speed. So not changing is also failing. So failure is an option. All we need to be able to do is unfail a lot faster than we can today. Good example. I was working with a company, smaller, medium-sized business, maybe call it 200 servers. How many of you work in an environment where you could wrap your arms around a couple hundred servers if you needed to? Okay. Let's say you had a big fail, big epic fail, pushed out a patch, say it was NT4 Service Pack 2, the service pack of blue screens. And you push that out and all your servers went bleh. How long would it take you? I'm seriously asking a number. In days, I'm guessing, how long would it take you to rebuild 200 machines from nothing? Assuming your data was intact, right? The data's on the SAN. That's why we keep the data on the SAN. So your data's intact, but the way of getting to the data all just died. How long would it take you? How many days? For you and your entire team, because I assume this is going to be an all-hands effort.
Except for the snowflake blocks.
How long? Months. It could. You guys have done the off-site restore, the disaster recovery practice where everybody runs off with a bunch of tapes and you start doing restores. Anybody done that? Isn't that fun? Wouldn't you rather just drink yourself to death than do that? I did that with Bell Atlantic once for our network integration division, and it was a 3-day experience. And I quit a week later because I thought, if this ever happens for real, I'm going to quit then for sure. So I'll do the right thing and just leave now. It's terrible. So I had a company, about 200 servers, had some really great talks with them, and they kind of went down this road. They're a big insurance company. So obviously, real-time transaction processing, actuaries, mission critical. Like their business can't run without the computers. Their business practically is the computers. They estimated, they did a big recovery. They tried to do about 10 servers, and so they took that result and multiplied it by 20 to come up with the total time. And they basically figured it would be easier to shut the company down and go form a new company. It was something like 6 months for complete back to work. They said, clearly this is unacceptable. And so they went down the DevOps approach. They've had some failures. And one time they did have a failure where they took 50 servers flat offline. And it took them 90 seconds to recover. Most people just thought the internet had gone a little wacky and didn't notice. 90 seconds. That's what we're talking about. When I say fail fast and then recover faster, I don't mean take it from a week to a day. I mean take it from a week to I can't even measure it. And you can. We have all the tools. We have all the technologies. We can make them better. And it won't cost $6 million. So before DevOps, recovery and response took a long time. That's why we were afraid of failure. Most companies aren't actually, if you really dig into the psychology of your managers, they're not afraid of failure. They're afraid of how long it's going to take to fix it. Failure's okay if you can fix it fast. After DevOps, it can be fast, so failure itself is less intimidating. Before DevOps, everything was mission critical. That printer in the HR director's office, mission critical. Except after DevOps, you actually take a serious look at what matters, what is actually mission critical. Great analogy to use? Ask someone if they've got something broken in their house. Go to the CIO, say, hey, you have anything broken in your house? I mean, I'm sure the hot water heater's fine, furnace probably works, HVAC is good, but do you have like a ding in the wall that just ticks you off every time you see it because you were carrying a sofa and you bashed the drywall and you just haven't had time to patch it yet? Most people have got something. You're like, well, that wasn't mission critical either, or you would have fixed it. And the house didn't fall down and no one's dying and your children are still eating, so shut up about your email. Change breaks things, we tell ourselves. Don't do change. Slow change down so that we, as infallible, immortal gods, can have time to review everything and make sure that there will be no failure, except that we're none of those things. And so all the time we take does not actually decrease our failure risk. After DevOps, change it. Who cares? We'll just change it again. And we're good at change. In fact, our core competency as IT people is changing stuff really fast. That's what we're good at. Go to your next job. What would you say really highlights your take on IT. Change everything immediately and then change it again right after. Change constantly. What's Jeffrey Snover saying? If you don't like change, you're in the wrong industry. Try lumber. There haven't been a new tree in a long time. We are the change people. And so our core competency is changing fast. Fast, even if it breaks something. DevOps, interestingly, is not one single thing. I've talked about a lot of what the characteristics are and about what some real implementations look like, but it's going to be different for every type of organization. If you're dealing with systems where actual living, breathing, carbon-based life forms will perish and cease to exist because of your failure, DevOps is going to look a little different for you, right? If you're working on the IT that makes an Aegis cruiser shoot down missiles, I can understand a heightened level of caution. So it's going to look a little bit different for everybody. Across different projects within a single organization, some things are more mission critical than others. Other things we're not so concerned about. If it breaks, we can get by till you fix it. But this idea of change with agility and fail with style are always inherent parts of this. We are not afraid of this maybe breaking something because we know we can fix it really quick. Do you want to know why developers, because there's a developer piece to this too, right? It's DevOps. You know why developers started going down this approach of more releases? Anyone? What causes things to fail? Change. If you change 2 things, you're now twice as likely to break something, right? What if you change 100? What if you change 1,000? Developers went with this more frequent release because it let them release smaller amounts of change. When you ship a release that only changed 2 things and something breaks, you don't have to look real hard to find the problem. When you wait 5 years between releases, Microsoft, and you ship something that breaks, you don't even know where to start because the people who wrote the code 5 years ago probably left. So there's a benefit to this in that more faster change actually creates the ability to recover faster because you're changing smaller amounts of things as you go. There are companies, and I work with a lot of them, and there are some big names you know. Spotify is a great example. They've been doing a lot of writing about their internal development process. And they, like everybody else, have got an infinitely long wish list of things they want to do, and they do a couple at a time. Sure, let's code that and then ship it. Didn't break? Great, code the next thing, ship it. They might update that app 6 times a month, but it's small each time so they know where to roll back to if they have to. And when you're shipping a small change, if you're like, oh crap, we need to just roll back to the last version, it's not going to be markedly different. It's not like you walked into work one day, rolled out Windows 10, said, uh-oh, and then everybody came in the next day and they're back to Windows 7 and they're like, but what happened? Right? When it's small, it's not as noticeable if you do have to roll back, so you can hide your tracks. Didn't we have this feature yesterday? I don't know what you're talking about. That never happened. You're stupid. Get out of here. You do have to change your brain on this, though, don't you? You have to think differently. Think differently about IT. Think about individual components that you work with today, those special Deer servers that you built by hand and have lovingly crafted over the course of your career. That's wrong. You can't do that anymore. Servers have to be generic and expendable so that you can blow them away and bring up a new one. It's like I was saying yesterday, we all tell the kids that, right? You need to shut up. I brought you into this world. I'll take you out of it and make another just like you. Well, your servers need to be just like that. That server's broken. What are you going to do? Pfft, new one. That one's not broke. Well, it'll break again in an hour. I don't care. Bang, new one. Also not broke. I've got folks I've worked with where they had these old legacy web apps that could run stably for about an hour and then they would explode. So at 40 minutes, they would just spin up a new one and kill that one. How many of you have done that with recycling worker process threads in IIS? Yeah. You know, it leaks memory and after about an hour, the server gets wacky. So let's just kill it every half hour. Fine. Do it with the whole server. When you can spin them up quick enough, you can even accommodate crappy developers. Who has crappy developers? So you do have to change the way you think about this. It's so different than what we've done before. And one of the reasons this becomes a big conversation point, especially in the Microsoft Windows-ish world that we all kind of work in, is this. A lot of folks got into this industry, and Microsoft made this part of the industry because it was easy to administer Windows. You didn't have to have a computer science degree. You didn't have to have years of experience with the command line or anything else. And it made Microsoft's empire. How many of you remember NetWare? Yeah, notice not everyone even knows what I'm talking about. Because it was hard, right? Well, the reason that this is sometimes difficult and it requires a bit of a brain change is because what we're telling people basically is, you know how easy Windows is to administer and how kind of fun it is, and it's just like your desktop machine, and you picked it up really quick and you kind of went from there. I need you to be more like a Linux guy now. And I know that's not what you're into, but that's where we are. That's what we want now. And so it's hard sometimes. And that's why not everyone and not every organization is going to make it. And that's fine. There's still going to be jobs for people who don't work in this type of environment. They might not be the top of the industry jobs, but that might be okay for some folks. So I'm not trying to, put the fear of God into you and tell you that everybody's about to lose their jobs unless you're doing this. Not the case. This is where a significant chunk of the industry is going to go, but not every company from a management level is going to be able to pull it off. And so there will still be places that are more like the traditional IT we've had. They will get smaller over time, and we're talking a decade or two, right? So a lot of us who aren't into that will have plenty of time to just retire. So you don't necessarily have to do, but if you want the top paying jobs, it's this. If you want the guaranteed job for 40 years, it's this. And even if you're already 50, if you've got kids or you've got friends with kids or you know young people who are looking to this industry, make sure you're pointing them in this direction because this is what they're going to be dealing with. This is their future. It doesn't have to be yours. You can probably work your way around it. It's fine. These things do take time. But remember that. Try and give them some good advice. Start small. You can do this with a small project. Pick something non-mission critical, like email or file servers, because file servers aren't mission critical. You should be using scalable file servers anyway. If one of them breaks, no one should care. The next time one breaks, don't rebuild it. Write something that rebuilds it for you. Right? That's where you start. That's easy. Domain controllers, infrastructure servers, stuff like that. My after lunch session is going to get more into some specifics, and I wanted to provide you with a little bit of a reading list. I also want to take, because we've got about 10 minutes, I want to take a few questions, but I want to do a little plug here too. I talked just a second ago about if you know kids or some young people maybe at the end of their high school career or getting close to that, maybe considering college, and they think IT might be for them. They think they're interested in the hardware still, right? They don't want to just be some app developer puke. They actually want to get their hands staticky, with electricity. Keep an eye on devopscollective.org for me. Specifically, keep an eye on that on April 4th, because that's the nonprofit I run that runs PowerShell.org, devopscollective.org. On April 4th, in conjunction with Pluralsight and Microsoft, as well as the Linux Foundation, Linux Professionals Foundation Institute, LPI, Linux Professional Institute, we're going to be launching a career education program for young people looking to enter the IT ops field and teaching them what they would need to get an entry-level job in IT with about a year of education and under $600 in expenses. And we've talked to about 3,800 hiring managers and senior professionals to make sure this program has what they need, all the way down to how to have a good phone conversation when you're on the help desk. I have abused my position in Pluralsight to bully authors into making the courses I want. And in addition to this program, which anybody can take on their own, and they don't even have to use Pluralsight, they can go assemble the materials out of books if they want to, or someone else, doesn't matter. We give you a model curriculum for them to follow. We are going to be doing 2 full ride scholarships that include online lab time, a build-it-yourself PC, and live mentoring weekly with an industry expert over the course of a 36-week program. And we're lining them up not only to get that entry-level IT job, but they're lining them up to learn to think about IT the DevOps way. We're teaching them some command line basics. We're teaching them both Windows and Linux, because that's the world we're in. So watch for that, because it's going to be open application to anybody residing in the US. April 4th, devopscollective.org. So, got time for a couple of questions. Ask me something, anything. Crap. You all look either overwhelmed or whelmed, I'm not sure. Yeah.
How about cost?
Cost.
You spin up more memory, more CPU, and you have to pay by.
Sure. Sure.
Control project that doesn't go too expensive.
Yeah, in a world where either...
Management likes to know what's going to cost.
Yeah. In a world where either on-prem or in the cloud, you're essentially paying for CPU cycles and disk and processor and memory and all that. I get it. How do you control this? Well, two ways. One, you're not necessarily running more stuff, because every time you spin something new up, you are taking something else down. So that's part of it. It winds up being a little bit of a wash if you look at an overall existing environment. My experience has been it's maybe a single-digit uptick to offer the test environment, the dev environments, but a lot of people are already doing that. So the cost doesn't necessarily shift a whole lot. The other thing is really look at your actual costs. Here's a really good example. Do you know what brand of server they run in AWS? You know who they went to buy all their boxes? No, me neither, because they have them made in Asia by the container load, and they're all white boxed. And so one of the reasons cloud computing compute cycles are a little cheaper than on-prem is because, dude, they're not getting a Dell, and you are. And they're paying a lot less for it. They also tend to build their data centers right next to what? Power stations. They build it next to the power factory so they don't have to ship the power quite as far, because transmission is your biggest expense in power. And so that's one of the reasons. So you look hard at some of your actual costs. In total, I have not worked with any companies that have said, since we've started doing this, our IT costs have gone up. Most have seen their costs go down, because one of your biggest expenses are your meat bags who are running around, and they've managed to deploy those off to other projects, or in some cases, I've had folks downsize. But you've already got a sunk investment in the hardware if you're talking on-prem. This actually tends to use it more efficiently. So your mileage may vary, but right now what the industry seems to be seeing is either net benefit to a wash. It's a good question though, and it's something to look at.
How do you start doing it in like a mission critical industry?
How do you start doing it in a mission critical industry? Find something that's less mission critical. Within there, find one small thing. Like I said, the deployment of a new domain controller, that's not mission critical, because we're not talking about taking them all offline. We're just talking about creating the automation tools for that, because building those tools is what will let you start to support slightly more mission critical. Now we're going to go after file servers. Next time a file server goes down, we're going to push a button to spin up a new one. And then we're going to automate the thing that pushes the button to spin up a new one. So when a file server goes down, a new one just pops up automatically and we don't even touch it. And then you work your way up to more and more mission critical things. But yeah, start small.
How do you control a development organization who wants to do everything right out of the gate?
How do you control a dev organization that wants to do everything out of the gate? Well, you can, but there's higher risk associated with that, and it probably costs more, because you're going to have to, you still have to maintain the existing estate while you're starting down this new path. And so you can't just pull everybody off of traditional IT and say, we're DevOps now, because there's a ramp up. You just tell them, here's what that looks like. In IT, I never say no. I say, here's what that'll cost. Email can't ever go down. Fine, here's what that costs. And we can't use cloud email. Okay, here's what that costs. I don't want to pay that. I don't care. That's what it costs. It's not a car. You don't get to negotiate. That's what it costs. And so you just lay out the business case. And if you don't know how to talk business case, come to our afternoon session, because we're going to be talking about that. That's a hugely critical IT skill. Just tell them what it costs. I kind of learned that from consulting, right? Somebody comes to you with a job. We'd like you to do this job. And you're like, I'd rather die. You never say that. You're like, yeah, sure, it's $1,000 an hour. Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe next time. You just, you price it accordingly. You know that's how consultants do it, right? Okay. What else? All right. So look, quick reminders, just in case anybody missed. Birds of a Feather lunch coming up right now. I'll apologize, but if you're in front of me in line, I'm going to cut because I got to get back and do another session. I also got to get to my table. So your patience with us speakers is appreciated. But come sit at my table, talk to me. Sit at Jason Helmick's table. Nothing interesting will happen, but he's a fun guy. And he's got the little hipster thing now. Have you seen this? Tonight, how do we get to the attendee party, which is at 7 o'clock? Outside the front of the hotel, up and over, past the Cromwell, past the Flamingo, right as you see Margaritaville, look up. You'll see the big glowy funnel cone thing. Turn slightly to your right and go into the building called The Link. That's the building as well as the street. Tag Bar is what you're after, T-A-G. And then look for some signs and people wearing Tech Mentor paraphernalia. And you should be able to find the elevator to go up. Free hors d'oeuvres, free cocktails, free drinks. You're welcome to bring a guest. Please wear your badge. You will get a free ticket to the High Roller Ferris wheel experience. Your guest will not, but they're more than welcome to buy one. I think they're like $35, I'll sell them for $50. How about that? Cool? Guys, thanks for being here. I hope to see you in some sessions today. Thank you.
That's our show for this month. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you'll check back next month for more of Pluralsight's IT Ops News and Talk. Until then, I'm Don Jones.